The countdown clock on my display reads 59 minutes and 40 seconds, and my hands will not stop shaking. My name is Vantor Ashkel, and I am an intelligence officer of the Sarn Dominion, standing on the bridge of the Kolonash, the personal throne vessel of Emperor Vok Theran. Below us, filling the entire forward window, hangs a blue and green world the natives call Earth. We have crossed 11,000 years of conquest to reach this moment, and in less than 1 hour, this planet will belong to us. That is what everyone around me believes. That is what I believed too, until the silence started to feel wrong. The bridge is full of quiet confidence. Officers move between stations with practiced calm, checking weapon arrays that could turn a continent to ash, reviewing troop transports that have never once been used, because no species has ever forced us to use them. Every world we have approached in this way has surrendered before the countdown reached 0. Some surrendered in the first 5 minutes. There is a name for what we do. We call it the silent hour. 1 hour to decide between existence and destruction. No civilization has ever chosen destruction. I was assigned to this fleet because I speak more human languages than anyone else in the Dominion. For 6 years I listened to Earth's broadcasts, their music, their arguments, their strange and endless news channels. I learned their words long before I ever expected to stand above their planet giving them an order to kneel. I thought I understood them. I was wrong about that too, though I did not know it yet. The Emperor stands at the center of the bridge, tall and still, his robes catching the light from the crystal displays. He does not raise his voice often. He does not need to. When he speaks, every station falls silent. "Begin the broadcast," he says. I feed the recorded message into the translation array myself, converting our words into English, into every language spoken on that small blue world. My voice, filtered through the ship's systems, becomes the voice of an empire. People of Earth, this is Emperor Vok Theran of the Sarn Dominion. Your world has been measured, studied, and judged. Resistance against our fleet is not possible. You have 1 hour to accept the terms of peaceful integration. At the end of that hour, if no answer is given, this fleet will proceed with full authority to secure your world by any means required. This is not a threat, it is a fact. The choice belongs to you. The message goes out across every frequency Earth uses to speak to itself. Radio, television, satellite relays, even the old undersea cables we tapped months ago while their scientists were still arguing about whether we were real. 60 minutes, that is the mercy we offer. 60 minutes to decide whether millions of people live in comfort as citizens of the Dominion, or vanish under fire from ships they cannot see coming. I expect noise. I expect panic. Every world we have approached responds within the first 10 minutes with pleading messages, offers of surrender, desperate promises. The humans have been broadcasting distress calls and arguments and music into space for over a century. I expect their radios to explode with fear. Instead, there is nothing. At first, no one on the bridge notices, because nothing is exactly what surrender sounds like in the final moments before someone submits. The silence feels like preparation, like a breath held before a door opens. The Emperor watches the countdown with his hands folded behind his back, unbothered, patient the way a predator is patient. I watch something else. I watch the sensor display. 50,000 vessels sit in a loose formation around the third planet, scattered without any pattern I recognize as tactical. Their engines are cold, their weapons show no active power signatures. To every analyst on this ship, it looks like a fleet that gave up before the fight even began, a graveyard of ships waiting for us to claim them. One junior officer near me actually laughs, a short, surprised sound, and says they must have already decided to run. I do not laugh. Something about the formation nags at me, though I cannot yet say what. 50,000 ships is not a small number. Even a frightened species does not build 50,000 ships and then leave them drifting like empty shells for an enemy fleet to admire. Commander Sesh Dral, second in rank on this bridge, orders a deeper scan of the human fleet. I watch the results scroll across my console, and my unease grows heavier with every line. Life signs are minimal across most of the vessels. Weapon systems show power levels barely above dormant. These ships are not manned for a fight. They may not be manned for anything at all. Dral turns to the Emperor. "My lord," he says, "the enemy fleet appears to be a decoy, automated hulls, likely unarmed, or armed with weapons too weak to matter. Their true forces may be hidden, or may not exist at all." The Emperor's expression does not change. "Then their weakness is even greater than we believed," he says. "Let them watch their empty ships drift while their world burns in fear. It changes nothing. The hour will end the same way it always ends." I want to agree with him. Every part of my training tells me to agree with him. But I keep thinking about the broadcasts I studied for 6 years, the arguments Earth had with itself about war and peace and pride, the songs that talked about standing tall when everything said to kneel. I think about a species that fought wars against itself for thousands of years and never once, in all their long and messy history, simply gave up because someone bigger told them to. The countdown reaches 50 minutes. Nothing changes on the human channels. No pleading, no offers, no fear. I check the old intercepted archives out of habit, pulling up recordings from decades of listening posts scattered near their solar system. I find fragments of speeches, recordings from human conflicts long before we ever arrived. Leaders standing in front of crowds promising that surrender was not something their people did, no matter the cost, no matter the size of the enemy. I remember dismissing these as empty performance when I first studied them. Every species postures, every species boasts before it kneels. That is what my superiors taught me. That is what 11,000 years of conquest has proven, over and over again. Except this silence does not feel like posturing. It feels like patience. 45 minutes remain. A young technician near the sensor array calls out that she has detected faint gravitational disturbances at the edge of the solar system, far beyond the human fleet, far beyond even their outermost moon. The readings are small, easy to dismiss as background noise from a passing comet or an unstable asteroid. I ask her to run the analysis twice. Both times the numbers come back the same. Something massive moved through that region recently, something large enough to bend space slightly, then vanished from detection entirely. I report this to Commander Drawl. He listens, considers it for a moment, then waves it away as an unrelated cosmic event. Comets do not concern us today, he says. Only the fear on that planet concerns us. I do not argue, because I have no proof. Only a feeling that has been growing steadily heavier since the countdown began. A feeling that the empty fleet drifting below us is not a sign of surrender, but a curtain hiding something we have not yet been allowed to see. 40 minutes. Still no answer from Earth. The Emperor finally shows the smallest flicker of something other than calm, a slight tightening around his eyes as he studies the silent channels himself. It is the first time in 6 years of watching him that I have seen him look, even briefly, uncertain. Perhaps they require a demonstration, he says quietly, more to himself than to us. Perhaps fear needs a reminder of its shape. He does not order an attack. Not yet. The rules of the silent hour are absolute, older than any living officer on this ship, older than the Emperor himself. No weapon is fired until the countdown reaches 0, or until the enemy fires first. It is meant to prove our confidence to every world we conquer. We are so certain of our strength that we give our enemies a full hour to accept the inevitable before we act. It has never once failed. Until now, I do not think anyone on this bridge has truly considered the word never as anything but a guarantee. 35 minutes. I request permission to review the broadcast records humanity has sent into space over the last century, not for propaganda or entertainment, but for anything resembling their military doctrine. Drawl grants it without much interest, distracted by reports from other stations. I search quickly, pulling old transmissions, technical papers, Earth once sent into orbit believing no one capable of understanding them was listening. Most of it is fragments, incomplete, decades old. But one pattern keeps repeating across everything I find. Humans do not plan for quick victories. They plan for long wars. They build for endurance, not display. Every ship I have seen from Earth until today has been small, almost fragile compared to Dominion standards. It never occurred to me to ask what they might have built quietly, away from any signal we could intercept, in the years since we first noticed them. 30 minutes remain, and the first true message finally arrives from the human fleet. Not a surrender, not a plea. A short transmission, translated instantly by my systems into words that make the entire bridge go quiet. This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning. The Emperor turns slowly toward the display where the message glows in careful, deliberate English. For the first time since I have known him, he does not respond immediately. He simply stares at those 6 words as the countdown behind them continues to fall, and somewhere deep in my chest, a cold certainty settles that we have made a terrible miscalculation, and that the 50,000 silent ships beneath us were never meant to fight at all. They were only ever meant to make us watch the wrong sky. The message repeats twice more, calm and unhurried, as if the humans below us have all the time in existence and we have none. This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning. I feel the weight of those words settle over the bridge like a change in air pressure before a storm. Commander Drawl orders the technicians to trace the origin point of the transmission, expecting to find it coming from one of the 50,000 drifting hulls, some final act of defiance from a crew about to be destroyed. Instead, the trace comes back scattered, bouncing between dozens of relay points across the solar system, deliberately impossible to pin to a single source. Whoever sent it wanted us to know they had sent it, and wanted us to have no idea where they actually were. The Emperor orders a full diagnostic sweep of every human vessel in view. I watch the results build across my console, and the picture that forms is stranger than anything I expected. These 50,000 ships carry no true crews at all. Life support systems on most of them are running at levels barely sufficient to keep a handful of maintenance systems functioning, nothing close to what would be needed to keep tens of thousands of people alive and ready to fight. Weapon batteries show power readings too low to threaten even a lightly shielded scout vessel, let alone a Dominion warship. Draal calls it exactly what it looks like. A bluff, he says, his voice edged with the beginning of relief. An empty fleet meant to make us hesitate before the real surrender comes. I want to believe him. It would be easier to believe him. But I keep circling back to one detail that no one else on the bridge seems to be asking about. If this fleet is empty, if it was never meant to fight, then where is humanity's actual defense? Every species we have ever approached, even the ones who eventually surrendered, gathered their true forces somewhere near their homeworld in those first tense minutes, desperate to look prepared, even when they were not. Earth has shown us nothing of the kind. No hidden battle line forming near their moon. No orbital defense platforms powering up in a last display of pride. Just this silent, empty curtain of ships, and beyond it, a planet that has not sent a single frightened voice into space. I request permission to review the older sensor logs, the readings from before the silent hour began, back when our fleet first entered the outer edge of their solar system 3 days ago. Draal grants it, more out of habit than genuine interest, his attention pulled toward reports from other stations trying to make sense of the human message. I pull the historical scans and begin comparing them against the current fleet positions, and slowly, carefully, a pattern begins to surface that makes my stomach tighten. 3 days ago, when we first arrived, our long-range sensors detected activity near several of Earth's moons and near a scattering of asteroids in their belt, faint industrial signatures consistent with mining operations or old orbital stations. At the time, nothing about those readings seemed important enough to flag for detailed analysis. We were focused on the planet itself, on cataloging its cities and its people and its weak, scattered military presence. Now, comparing those old readings against what our sensors show today, I noticed that several of those faint industrial signatures have gone completely dark, not destroyed, not damaged, simply switched off, as if whatever was operating there no longer needed to hide behind the pretense of ordinary activity. I bring this to Draal directly, laying out the comparison on his display. He studies it for a long moment, his earlier confidence flickering slightly. Perhaps mining stations shutting down for safety, he offers, though his voice carries less certainty than before. Or perhaps, I say, choosing my words carefully, they were never mining stations at all. Before he can respond, a new alert flashes across the sensor grid, and this time even the most confident officers on the bridge fall silent. Gravitational readings, similar to the faint disturbance we detected earlier near the edge of the system, are now appearing in multiple locations simultaneously, clustered around the asteroid belt and near 2 of Earth's smaller moons. The readings are stronger this time, unmistakable, the kind of distortion caused by something enormous moving with great speed and great control. The Emperor finally speaks, his voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs building across the bridge. Identify those signatures immediately. The technicians work frantically, running every scanning protocol available to us, and the results that come back only deepen the unease spreading through the room. Whatever is generating those distortions is shielded against every detection method we possess, visible only in the brief moments before it moves again, vanishing like a shadow slipping between one patch of darkness and the next. It is not one object. The readings suggest dozens of separate sources, possibly more, spread across a wide arc of space that curves around behind our own fleet's position. I feel the shape of the trap before I fully understand it, the way you sense a held breath in a room before someone finally exhales. The 50,000 ships beneath us were never meant to be humanity's true defense. They were placed exactly where we would look, drifting and silent and unmanned, drawing every sensor and every eye toward the empty spectacle of a fleet too weak to matter, while something else moved into position around us, hidden by the very confidence that has carried the Dominion through 11,000 years of unbroken conquest. I share this thought with Draal, my voice lower now, careful not to let it carry to the Emperor before I am certain. Commander, I believe the human fleet in view was deployed as a distraction. Their true forces may already be moving around our position, using the cover of these decoy ships and the confusion of the countdown to close the distance undetected. Draal's expression hardens, and for the first time since I have served under him, I see something close to genuine alarm cross his face. He orders an immediate perimeter scan, extending our sensor range far beyond the human fleet, searching the space behind and around our formation rather than simply ahead of it toward the planet. The results take almost 2 full minutes to compile, an eternity when every second feels heavier than the last. When the data finally resolves, the bridge falls into a silence deeper than any I have heard since this mission began. Along a wide curve behind our fleet, previously hidden by the gravitational shadow of a nearby dwarf planet, and by shielding technology far more advanced than anything we believed Earth capable of producing, a second fleet becomes visible. Not 50,000 empty hulls this time, but several thousand vessels, far fewer in number, yet radiating power signatures that dwarf anything we detected from the decoy fleet in front of the planet. These ships are crewed. These ships are armed. And every single one of them is positioned with precise, deliberate purpose along the flanks and rear of our formation. The Emperor stares at the display for a long moment, his composure cracking just slightly at the edges, though his voice remains steady when he finally speaks. "Impossible," he says. "No species advances this quickly. No species hides an entire warfleet without a single leak, without a single failed transmission reaching our listening posts across years of observation." I think of 6 years spent studying human broadcasts, searching for signs of fear, of desperation, of the posturing every conquered world displays before it finally kneels. I think of how carefully those broadcasts avoided any mention of true military strength, how every glimpse we were given of Earth's defenses showed exactly the kind of fragile, outdated technology that would make a Dominion fleet feel safe approaching. I understand now, far too late, that we were never watching Earth prepare to lose. We were watching Earth prepare a performance, crafted with patience across years, designed specifically to convince us that this moment, this silent hour, would end exactly the way every other silent hour in our history has ended. 25 minutes remain on the countdown. The human message plays once more across every channel, calm and unwavering. "This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning." Draal turns to the Emperor, urgency finally breaking through the rigid formality that governs every interaction on this bridge. "My lord, I recommend we abandon the silent hour protocol and move to immediate defensive positioning. Whatever this second fleet intends, we should not remain vulnerable while we wait for a countdown that clearly no longer serves any purpose." The Emperor is silent for a long moment, and I understand in that silence the true weight of what is being asked of him. The silent hour is not simply tradition. It is the foundation of everything the Dominion has built its reputation upon, a symbol of such overwhelming confidence that no enemy has ever dared to test it. To abandon it now, in front of every officer on this bridge, in front of a species he has already declared conquered, would be to admit that the confidence itself might have been misplaced from the very beginning. "We will not break protocol for a bluff," he finally says, though his voice carries less certainty than his words intend. "Continue the countdown. Reinforce shields to standard combat levels as a precaution, nothing more. Earth will surrender before the hour ends, as every world before them has surrendered." I want to speak, to point out that nothing about this situation resembles any world we have conquered before, but rank and protocol hold my voice in place even as every instinct I have built over years of studying this species screams that we are standing in the exact center of a trap that has been years in the making. I watch the countdown continue its steady fall, watch the hidden fleet hold its position with a patience that feels less like desperation and more like discipline, and I understand, with a certainty that chills me far more than any weapon readout ever could, that we have already lost something today that the Dominion has never lost before. We have lost the certainty that we understand our enemy. 20 minutes remain, and somewhere beyond the edge of our sensors, I sense that Earth is simply waiting for us to make the last mistake that will bring this countdown to an end on their terms, not ours. 20 minutes on the countdown, and the bridge of the Kalinash has transformed from a place of quiet confidence into something closer to a held breath spread across 100 officers. I stand at my station, watching the hidden human fleet hold perfectly still along the edges of our formation, and I try to understand what kind of species builds a trap this precise, then simply waits inside it without firing a single shot. Commander Draal has ordered every gunnery station to full readiness, though the Emperor's restriction remains in place. No weapon may fire until the countdown reaches 0, or until the enemy strikes first. It is the oldest law of the Dominion military, older than any ship in this fleet, and even now, with a hidden war fleet surrounding us, no one on this bridge dares suggest breaking it without the Emperor's direct order. I return to my console and pull every fragment of human history I can access from our archives, searching for something that might explain the shape of what is happening around us. I find records of ancient human conflicts, long before space travel, where smaller forces repeatedly defeated larger ones not through greater strength, but through patience, misdirection, and a willingness to let an enemy believe exactly what the enemy wanted to believe. I find records of engineers and scientists who spent years building weapons in secret, hidden from rivals who never once suspected the quiet workshops down the street held the seeds of a war they would eventually lose. I begin to understand that the emptiness of the 50,000 decoy ships and the terrible precision of the hidden fleet are not separate events. They are two halves of the same design, built by a species that has spent its entire history learning how to survive against opponents stronger than itself. 15 minutes remain. A new alert flashes across my console, quieter than the earlier warnings, easy to miss beneath the tension already gripping the bridge. I study it twice before I understand what I am looking at. Small vessels, no larger than shuttles, have begun moving away from several points along the hidden fleet's position, drifting slowly toward our formation, at speeds too low to register as an attack, too small to justify breaking the Emperor's order to hold fire. I report this immediately to Draal. He studies the readings, frowning, and orders a closer scan. The results come back strange. These small vessels carry no visible weapons, no offensive systems of any kind. Their power signatures are almost entirely dedicated to communication arrays and sensor equipment, nothing that resembles a threat by any measure the Dominion recognizes. Observation drones, Draal murmurs, more to himself than to me. They are watching us, recording everything we do. I feel the shape of the design settling further into place, and the understanding chills me more than any weapon could. Every second of this countdown, every order given on this bridge, every hesitation the Emperor shows in front of his officers, is being recorded, studied, prepared for a purpose I cannot yet fully imagine. Humanity is not simply defending itself today. It is building a record of exactly how the Dominion behaves under pressure, exactly how our confidence bends when it is finally tested. 10 minutes remain. The Emperor stands motionless at the center of the bridge, his gaze fixed on the display showing the hidden fleet's position, and for the first time I see something in his posture that I never expected to witness in 6 years of service beneath him. Doubt. Not fear exactly, not yet, but the particular stillness of a mind working through possibilities it never expected to need. He turns to Draal. Options, he says simply. Draal hesitates only a moment before answering. My lord, if their fleet intends to strike the moment the countdown reaches 0, our shields will absorb the opening exchange, and our numbers should allow us to overwhelm them regardless of their positioning. If they intend something else, something we have not yet identified, then our best option remains readiness rather than provocation. The Emperor considers this, then gives a single, decisive nod. Reinforce all defensive systems immediately. Prepare full retaliatory sequences, ready to fire the instant the countdown ends, or the instant they act against us first. We came to conquer a world, and a world we will conquer, regardless of the games its people choose to play in these final minutes. I want to point out that nothing about the last 20 minutes suggests we are dealing with games, that every move humanity has made has been deliberate, patient, and precise, in a way that feels less like desperation, and more like a plan executed exactly as intended. But the words remain locked behind rank and protocol, and I return to my console instead, watching the countdown fall toward 5 minutes, then 4, then 3. At 2 minutes, something changes. The small observation vessels that had been drifting near our formation suddenly power down their sensor arrays and begin retreating back toward the hidden fleet, moving with a coordinated precision that leaves no doubt they are following a single, unified command. I feel my chest tighten as I watch them go, understanding on some instinctive level that whatever they came to observe, they have finished observing it, and now the true test is about to begin. 1 minute remains. The bridge falls into a silence so complete that I can hear the quiet hum of the ship's systems beneath the tension, the small mechanical sounds that usually disappear beneath conversation and activity. Every officer stands at their station, watching either the countdown or the hidden fleet, waiting for whichever comes first to determine the shape of everything that follows. 30 seconds. The Emperor's hand rests on the edge of the command console, his knuckles pale against the dark surface. I realize, watching him, that even now, even with everything we have discovered in the last hour, some part of him still believes that Earth will surrender in these final seconds, that the ancient pattern of the silent hour will hold exactly as it always has, that 11,000 years of unbroken success cannot possibly end here, against a species we first noticed only decades ago. 10 seconds. 5. The countdown reaches 0, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, absolutely nothing happens. The bridge holds its collective breath in that impossible silence, and I allow myself, for one brief and foolish moment, to believe that perhaps the Emperor was right after all, that the humans have simply run out the clock in some final act of stubborn defiance, before finally sending the surrender we have waited an hour to receive. Then the sensors erupt with light. Every ship in the hidden human fleet moves at once, their engines flaring to life with a precision that suggests the command was given long before the countdown ever reached 0, waiting only for that exact moment to execute. They do not charge toward us in the chaotic, desperate rush I would expect from a smaller force facing overwhelming numbers. They move instead like a single organism, flowing into positions along the exact gaps in our formation, where our shield coverage overlaps least effectively, gaps that should be nearly impossible to identify without detailed knowledge of Dominion shield architecture. I feel a cold certainty settle over me as the first strikes land, precise and devastating, targeting not the thickest armor of our largest vessels but the specific junctions where shield generators connect to hull structure, points of weakness that our own engineers consider nearly theoretical, so difficult to strike that no enemy has ever managed it before. Ship after ship along our outer formation shudders under impacts that should not be possible with the weapon technology we believed Earth possessed only hours ago. Draal shouts orders across the bridge, his composure finally breaking under the strain of watching decades of military doctrine collapse in real time. Return fire, full spread, target their lead vessels. The Kalanash's own weapon batteries power up around us, and I feel the ship shudder as it unleashes its first offensive strike of the engagement, a wall of energy aimed at the nearest human vessels. The strike should be devastating. Against any fleet we have encountered before, it would have been. Instead, I watch in disbelief as the human ships scatter with impossible speed, their formations breaking apart and reforming in patterns that seem to anticipate exactly where our weapons will fire before we fire them. Only a handful of shots connect, and even those seem to do less damage than our targeting systems predicted, as if the human vessels carry defensive systems specifically calibrated against the exact weapon signatures the Dominion has used for centuries. I finally understand, watching this unfold, why the 50,000 decoy ships mattered so much beyond simply distracting our attention. They were not only a curtain to hide the true fleet behind them, they were also a study. Every scan we ran against those empty hulls during the countdown, every attempt to analyze their weak point and their systems, fed directly into whatever process the true human fleet used to calibrate its own defenses in these final minutes before the engagement began. We spent the entire hour unknowingly showing our enemy exactly how we intended to fight them. The Emperor's voice cuts through the chaos building across the bridge, sharp with an authority that still carries the weight of 11,000 years of unbroken command, even as everything around us suggests that authority may finally be meeting its limit. Divert full power to forward shields. Concentrate our fire on their capital vessels. We have faced greater numbers before and prevailed. We will prevail again today. But even as he gives the order, I notice something on my display that makes the cold certainty in my chest deepen into something closer to genuine alarm. The human fleet is not simply fighting with skill and precision, it is fighting with patience, drawing our largest vessels into positions that seem almost too convenient, hurting our formation with subtle, deliberate maneuvers rather than brute force, the way a skilled hunter guides prey toward a waiting trap rather than simply chasing it down. I try to bring this observation to Draal, but the noise on the bridge has grown too loud, officers shouting damage reports and tactical updates over each other as the engagement intensifies around us. I watch the tactical display instead, tracking the slow, deliberate movement of the human formation, and I understand with growing dread that whatever they are herding us toward, we are still many minutes away from discovering what waits at the end of that careful, patient maneuver. The Kalanash shudders again under another precise strike, this one closer to our own position near the ship's center, and I grip the edge of my console as alarms begin sounding across the bridge, warning of damage to systems I never expected to see threatened in my lifetime of service. Somewhere beyond the chaos of the engagement I can still hear, faintly, through the ship's communication systems, the echo of that same calm human transmission, repeating one final time before the noise of battle drowns it out completely. This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning. Smoke fills the lower corridors of the Kalanash, though our ship carries no true fire, only the thick chemical haze released when shield generators overload and burn through their casings. I brace against my console as another impact rocks the bridge, and I watch the tactical display continue to shift in ways that no longer resemble anything close to a fair contest between forces. Draal shouts new orders, his voice hoarse now from an hour of tension finally breaking into open urgency. Fall back to secondary formation. Protect the flagship at all costs. Around us, the surviving vessels of our fleet attempt to comply, engines flaring as they try to pull back into a tighter defensive shell around the Kalanash. But the human ships anticipate the movement before it fully begins, sliding into the gaps our retreat creates with a timing that feels less like combat and more like a rehearsed performance they have practiced 1,000 times before this day ever arrived. I watch one of our largest support cruisers, the Threndel, attempt to shield the Kalanash's flank, only for 3 human vessels to strike its weakened generator junction in near-perfect unison, the exact vulnerability our own engineers considered too difficult for any enemy to reliably target. The Threndel's shields collapse entirely within seconds, and the ship drifts out of formation, crippled but not destroyed, its remaining systems venting atmosphere into the vacuum in a long silver plume visible even from our position. I realize, watching this happen again and again across our formation, that the humans are not fighting to destroy us. Ship after ship suffers the same pattern, precise strikes to shield junctions and propulsion systems, disabling rather than obliterating, leaving crews alive but powerless, vessels drifting but intact. It would be so easy to mistake this restraint for mercy, and some part of me, still clinging to the last shreds of Dominion pride, wants to believe that is exactly what it is. But watching the calm, controlled precision of every strike, I understand it is not mercy at all. It is control. Humanity is choosing exactly how much damage to inflict, exactly which systems to disable, with a confidence that leaves no doubt they could have chosen destruction instead, and simply decided against it for reasons of their own. The Emperor stands at the center of the bridge, his composure finally beginning to crack in ways I never expected to witness. His hands grip the edge of the command console tightly enough that I can see the strain in his posture even from across the room. Around him, officers deliver damage reports in increasingly strained voices, each one detailing another vessel disabled, another section of our formation collapsing under the weight of an attack we still do not fully understand. Status of the eastern flank, the Emperor demands, his voice carrying an edge I have never heard in 6 years of service beneath him. Collapsed, my lord, comes the reply. 17 vessels disabled, no losses reported, but all 17 are drifting without power, unable to rejoin the formation. Western flank, he demands next, and receives nearly identical news. Another significant portion of our fleet rendered helpless without a single vessel actually destroyed. I understand, listening to these reports accumulate, that humanity is not simply winning this engagement. They are demonstrating something, proving a point with a precision that feels almost surgical in its restraint, and I begin to suspect that whatever point they intend to prove, we are about to discover it whether we wish to or not. I return my attention to the tactical display, and notice the slow, deliberate herding pattern I identified earlier has nearly completed its purpose. The Kalanash, along with a small cluster of remaining escort vessels, has been pushed by the accumulated pressure of the engagement into a position nearly isolated from the rest of our fleet, surrounded on almost every side by human vessels that have stopped advancing entirely, holding their positions in a tight, controlled perimeter around us. I bring this to Draal immediately, my voice tight with the certainty of what it means. Commander, we have been isolated. The human fleet has stopped attacking. I believe they intend to force a direct confrontation with the flagship specifically. Draal's face pales as he studies the display himself, and for a long moment, neither of us speaks, understanding settling over the bridge in a silence that feels heavier than any alarm or damage report. The Emperor notices the shift in atmosphere and turns toward us, his expression demanding an explanation before either of us can offer one voluntarily. Report, he commands. My lord, Draal says carefully. The enemy fleet has ceased offensive action against our remaining forces. Our position has been isolated from the rest of the formation. I believe they intend some form of direct communication or confrontation specifically with this vessel. The Emperor's jaw tightens, and I watch him wrestle visibly with the weight of a decision I know he never expected to face in his lifetime of unbroken command. Around us, the human fleet holds its position with a discipline that carries no trace of triumph or aggression, simply a patient, watchful stillness that feels somehow more unsettling than the earlier chaos of open combat. A new transmission arrives, cutting through the tense silence of the bridge, and this time it does not repeat the earlier message. A new voice speaks instead, translated instantly by my own systems into the careful, measured tones of a language I recognize immediately as English, though the voice itself carries none of the fear or desperation the Dominion has come to expect from every conquered world before this one. This is Fleet Commander Owen Marlowe of the Earth Defense Coalition, speaking directly to Emperor Vok Theron. Your flagship is currently isolated and unable to receive reinforcement. Your remaining fleet has been disabled without significant loss of life on either side, a choice we made deliberately and could have made differently. We are prepared to discuss terms. We recommend you consider that offer carefully, because it will not remain available indefinitely. The bridge falls into a silence so complete that I can hear my own pulse in my ears. The Emperor stands motionless, staring at the display where the message continues to glow in careful, deliberate translation, and I understand, watching him, that we have arrived at the exact moment this entire engagement was designed to produce. Not humanity's destruction, not even the Dominion's destruction, something else entirely. Something that feels, for the first time in 11,000 years of conquest, like a negotiation offered from a position of genuine strength, rather than desperate surrender. The Emperor turns to Draal, his voice quieter now than I have ever heard it, stripped of the absolute confidence that has defined every moment of his command since I first joined this fleet. What forces remain to us, he asks. Draal studies the tactical display for a long moment before answering. The Kalanash remains functional, though our shields are significantly weakened. Approximately 6 escort vessels remain capable of limited combat action. The remainder of our fleet, my lord, is disabled but largely intact. Casualties have been minimal compared to the scale of the engagement. I notice something in Draal's voice as he delivers this report, a note of confusion layered beneath the exhaustion, and I recognize it because I feel the same confusion myself. Minimal casualties. An entire fleet disabled, humiliated, outmaneuvered at every turn, and yet remarkably few lives lost on either side. It does not match anything in the Dominion's long history of conquest, where victory has always been measured as much by the scale of destruction inflicted as by the outcome achieved. Humanity has just demonstrated overwhelming tactical superiority, while somehow avoiding the devastating losses such a victory would normally require. And I understand, slowly, that this restraint was never an accident. It was as carefully planned as every other element of this engagement. The Emperor stands in silence for a long moment, and I watch something shift behind his eyes, the particular stillness of a mind confronting a truth it has spent an entire lifetime believing impossible. "Open a channel," he finally says, his voice quiet but steady. "I will speak with this fleet commander directly." I move to comply immediately, my hands working across my console to establish the connection, and as the channel opens, I feel the strange, dizzying awareness that I am about to witness something no Sarn officer has ever witnessed before in the long history of our empire. Not a surrender delivered by a conquered world, trembling and desperate. A conversation, offered calmly, between equals, by a species we arrived here fully believing incapable of anything but quiet submission. The channel connects, and for a moment, neither side speaks, the silence stretching between two fleets that have just fought each other to a standstill unlike anything either has ever experienced before. Then the Emperor draws himself up to his full height, gathering whatever remains of his composure, and speaks the first words of what I already suspect will become one of the most important conversations in the history of our empire. "I am listening, Commander Marlowe," he says. "Speak your terms." The image resolves on our main display, and for the first time in 6 years of studying this species from a distance, I see a human being look directly at an emperor of the Sarn Dominion, without a trace of fear in his expression. Commander Owen Marlowe appears younger than I expected, his uniform simple compared to the ceremonial robes filling our own bridge, his posture calm in a way that feels earned rather than performed. "Emperor Vok Theran," he begins, his voice steady, carrying none of the triumph I might have expected from a species that has just accomplished something no other world has ever managed against us. "I want to start by saying that nothing about today was intended as cruelty. Every strike our fleet made was calculated specifically to disable, not destroy. Your crews are alive. Your ships, though damaged, remain largely intact. That was a deliberate choice, and I want you to understand why we made it before we discuss anything else." The Emperor's jaw tightens, and I can see the effort it costs him to respond with anything resembling composure. "You speak as though restraint earns you some form of gratitude," he says. "You have humiliated an empire 11,000 years in the making." Marlowe does not flinch at this, though something in his expression softens slightly, less triumphant than thoughtful. "We didn't do this for gratitude, Emperor. We did it because we studied your history the same way you studied ours, and we learned that every world the Dominion has ever conquered was given exactly one choice: kneel or be destroyed. We wanted to show you there was a third option, one your empire has apparently never encountered before today." I watch the Emperor absorb this, and I notice Draal beside me has gone very still, his attention fixed entirely on the exchange unfolding across the display. Around the bridge, other officers have quietly abandoned their stations to listen, the ordinary business of running a warship forgotten in the face of a conversation that feels like it is reshaping the fundamental rules our entire military culture has operated under for longer than any of us have been alive. "Explain," the Emperor says finally, the single word carrying more weight than any full sentence could. Marlowe nods slightly, as if he expected the request. 3 years ago, your listening posts intercepted our communications and began studying us. What you didn't know is that we noticed your listening posts almost as quickly as you noticed us. We've spent those 3 years learning everything we could about the Dominion, your history, your conquests, the pattern you follow with every world you approach. We learned that your empire has never once faced genuine resistance, because every species you've encountered either surrendered immediately or fought back with technology so far beneath yours that the outcome was never truly in question. We built our entire strategy around one simple fact: you have never had to adapt because you have never needed to. I feel the truth of this settle over me with an uncomfortable weight, understanding now why the 50,000 decoy ships worked so effectively, why the hidden fleet's precision felt almost supernatural in its accuracy. It was never supernatural. It was simply the result of a species studying its enemy, with the same careful patience the Dominion has spent millennia not needing to develop, because no one has ever forced us to. The Emperor is silent for a long moment before speaking again, his voice quieter now, stripped further of the imperial authority that has defined every word he has spoken since I first joined this fleet. "What do you want from us now?" he asks. "What terms do you intend to demand?" Marlowe's expression shifts, and for the first time, something that might be called satisfaction crosses his features, though it carries no cruelty in it. "We're not interested in conquering your empire, Emperor. That was never the goal. We want 3 things, and I think you'll find them more reasonable than you expect." He raises a single finger. "First, Earth remains independent, permanently, with no future demands for surrender or integration from the Dominion. Second, your empire will cease all further contact with our solar system unless we initiate it ourselves. And third, and this is the part I suspect will surprise you most, we want you to carry a message back to every world within your empire that has ever surrendered to the Dominion, out of fear rather than genuine agreement. We want them to know that resistance is possible. We want them to know exactly what happened here today. I watch the Emperor's face carefully as this final term registers, and I understand immediately why Marlowe saved it for last. The first two terms are almost generous by the standards of what the Dominion typically demands from conquered worlds, but the third term is not generous at all. It is a deliberate strike aimed not at our fleet or our military strength, but at the very foundation of how the Dominion has maintained control over 11,000 years of conquered territory. An empire held together as much by the belief that resistance is impossible as by any actual military dominance. You ask me to plant the seed of my own empire's destruction, the Emperor says slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. Marlowe does not deny it. I ask you to tell the truth, Emperor. What your empire does with that truth is entirely up to you. But I think you already understand that a truth, once spoken, cannot be unspoken again. Every world under your control will eventually learn what happened here today, whether you tell them or we do. We'd simply prefer it come from you, with whatever dignity that choice allows you to keep. The silence that follows stretches long enough that I begin to wonder if the Emperor will refuse entirely, will choose destruction over the humiliation of carrying this message back to an empire that has never known him as anything but absolute in his authority. I watch him closely, and I see the exact moment something shifts behind his eyes, the recognition that refusal here offers nothing but the certain destruction of what remains of our fleet, while acceptance at least offers the chance to shape how this story is eventually told. I accept your terms, Fleet Commander, he says finally, each word costing him visibly. Earth will remain independent. The Dominion will withdraw from your solar system and make no further contact unless invited, and I will carry your message back to my empire, though I make no promise of how it will be received. That's all we ask, Marlowe replies, and something in his tone suggests genuine respect rather than triumph, an acknowledgement of the difficulty of what the Emperor has just agreed to. We'll begin releasing your disabled vessels immediately. Your crews will find their propulsion and shield systems restored within the hour. We ask only that your fleet depart our system without further incident. The channel closes, and the bridge falls into a silence unlike anything I have experienced in 6 years of service. Around me, officers stand at their stations, processing the enormity of what has just occurred, an agreement negotiated not from a position of desperate surrender, but between two forces that have just proven themselves capable of standing against each other, as something closer to equals. I am pulled from my thoughts by a quiet request relayed through the ship's communication system, addressed specifically to me. Fleet Commander Marlowe has requested a brief conversation with the Dominion's lead intelligence officer, the one responsible for the linguistic translation of the initial ultimatum. I feel a strange mixture of apprehension and curiosity as I make my way to a private communication terminal, wondering what a human commander could possibly want from someone whose entire role in this engagement was simply translating threats into words his people would understand. The connection opens, and Marlowe's face appears before me, his expression calmer now, more relaxed than the careful formality he maintained during his conversation with the Emperor. You did the actual language work on that ultimatum, he says, not quite a question. I confirm this, uncertain what response he expects from me. Your translation was excellent, he says, something almost like a smile touching his expression. Genuinely well done, considering how difficult our language can be to render accurately. I wanted you to know that, because I suspect you're one of the few people on that ship who actually took the time to understand us rather than simply catalog our weaknesses. I do not know how to respond to this, and something in my hesitation must show, because Marlowe continues without waiting for a reply. I read your service record when we intercepted your fleet's communications, he says. 6 years studying our broadcasts. That's a long time to spend learning about a people you were told would simply surrender the moment they saw your ships. I imagine that gave you a different perspective than most of your colleagues. I consider his words carefully before answering, choosing my response with more honesty than I expect the Dominion's rigid protocols would normally permit. I did begin to suspect, over those years, that your species would not respond the way our doctrine predicted, I admit. I did not fully understand how deep that difference ran until today. Marlowe nods, as if this confirms something he already suspected. That's more self-awareness than most conquerors ever manage, he says. I hope your empire listens to what you learned today, even if I suspect it won't be easy for them to hear it. The conversation ends shortly after, and I return to my station as the bridge begins the slow process of coordinating our fleet's withdrawal. Disabled vessels gradually regaining power as promised. Crews reporting in with a mixture of relief and quiet humiliation that I suspect will follow this fleet for the rest of its existence. I watch the Emperor stand at the center of the bridge, his posture still upright, still carrying the outward appearance of imperial authority, though something fundamental has clearly shifted behind his composed expression. As our fleet begins its slow retreat from the solar system, I find myself looking back one final time at the small blue and green world we arrived, believing we would conquer within a single hour. I think about the 6 years I spent studying this species from a distance, listening to their broadcasts, learning their languages, quietly building an understanding that none of my superiors ever thought worth taking seriously. I think about the 50,000 empty ships that drew our attention exactly where humanity wanted it, and the hidden fleet that waited with a patience I am not certain the Dominion has ever demonstrated in our entire long history of conquest. I think most of all about the message the Emperor now carries back to an empire that has never once questioned its own inevitability. A message that will eventually reach every world under Dominion control, whispered first in quiet uncertainty before growing, I suspect, into something far louder. I do not know what will become of the Dominion once that message spreads, whether it will strengthen our empire through the lesson learned here, or whether it will begin the slow unraveling of 11,000 years of unquestioned authority. What I know, watching Earth shrink slowly behind us as our fleet withdraws in something far closer to retreat than victory, is that the galaxy has just learned something today that it will not soon forget. There is a difference between a species too weak to resist and a species patient enough to wait for the exact moment resistance becomes overwhelming. Today, for the first time in the long history of the Sarn Dominion, we finally understood which one we had found. And somewhere behind us, on a small world we once believed would simply kneel, I imagine the countdown clock we built to demonstrate our own inevitability now running in reverse, counting down instead toward the moment the rest of the galaxy finally learns what 50,000 silent ships were truly capable of teaching us.